All right, what's up, everybody? We are officially live, and this is hopefully it'll be a good discussion on the ongoing MPC signer proposal in the House of Stake. I'm just going to be doing a little bit of a brief introduction of everyone here, and then letting the conversation go off on its own. So we have Anton from Near One, we have Kendall from Proximity Labs, we have Sal from Sovereign. And then we have two of our very own House of Stake and governance support personnel, Angela, who is House of Stake head of governance, and Klaus, who's CEO of Hack Humanity. Should be a fun conversation. I'm going to hand this off to Angela, and looking forward to hearing what's the latest on the MPC proposal.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Angela, Head of Governance at House of Stake. Let me give you a brief introduction of where we are heading to with House of Stake, the current status, and let me also give you some more details on what we'd like to discuss today. Can you pull up my slides? Okay, all right. So Near House of Stake focused on good decisions, not only decentralized alone. House of Stake is the decentralized decision-making engine at Near. It's based on Near token holder vote. Voting power at House of Stake depends on the amount of Near locked voters and the duration of Near locked. So this creates V Near, your voting power. It works like this. You lock Near, you receive V Near tokens, you hold and grow voting power, and then you delegate and vote and participate in decision-making at House of Stake. You start here at houseofstake.org assets. Currently, we are running a program that offers additional rewards for locking Near on top of liquid staking. So this is particularly relevant for those who are keen to receive or put their Near to work. Nevertheless, you can lock Near at any point in time and receive Near voting power. Currently, the status of Near locked is almost 4 million locked in the system, 379 participants in decision-making. And the key principles at House of Stake, we balance token-based and knowledge-based decision-making, aim to achieve 10% Near locked in the system, decisions in the best interest of the Near ecosystem, and progressive decentralization. And the proposal that we discussed today is a perfect example for this MPC node infrastructure financing program. We have been collaborating with Sal and Kendall on this as proposal authors. And this session should give everyone the opportunity to take a look at the proposal, understand why this will be in the best interest of Near, how execution looks like, how evaluation of the program looks like, and ultimately, of course, lock your Near, participate in decision-making, and make your voice count. I stop here, and let's start with a quick overview on why MPC signers are so relevant and why this decision on the financing program is so important.
Thanks, Angela. So maybe I can kick it off on this side and just contextualize the background and logic for putting forward this proposal, which really stems from a year and a half of work that the Near One team has led with Anton and Bowen on the development side, and as well with Kendall and the Proximity team really being the stewards of bootstrapping the system to the point that it is today. So for those that are not familiar, the MPC nodes that are involved in chain signatures as a product on Near are integral infrastructure sitting behind the Near Intents product. Obviously, over the past 6 to 9 months, we've seen incredible growth and traction around Near Intents, and a lot of the foundational components, and increasingly over the next 6 months, will be utilizing chain signatures and the MPC node infrastructure that sits behind them. So to date, these nodes have been supported from an incentive perspective through what I described in the proposal as a less sustainable financing approach, which were really intermittent grants that Kendall and the Proximity team executed to start the bootstrapping phase of the program. And then ultimately, as we were standing up Sovereign over the past 90 to 120 days and really leaning into scaling the MPC network and driving some business development work around near intents, we recognized that one of the key points that was required for us to engage in expanding the network was really solving the incentive system that sits behind the MPC nodes. So we set out on this journey about a month and a half ago now to draft and author a proposal in coordination and collaboration with Kendall and his team. And then also, obviously, over the past 2 weeks with, I would say, great engagement from the community, a number of different perspectives, governance, technical, and otherwise, to rally around a proposal to provide a sustainable incentive system, leveraging House of Stake, now reaching maturity to consider a vote of this nature, and then ultimately putting forward the proposal that we did 2 weeks ago, and then subsequently a second iteration later last week. We view this as a critical and important proposal that funds critical infrastructure and ultimately will power near intents, but behind the scenes to build more resilient, secure, and decentralized infrastructure. So I'm sure others have comments and color from their perspectives, but I do see this as one of the most important infrastructure-focused incentive design spaces that we could be operating within. And so we felt it was imperative that we put this forward first for House of Stake consideration. I don't know, guys, if you have anything to add on to that or if I did a decent job.
I'd say a great job. No, I mean, like, solid. You really hit all the key points there. I think what I'll add to that is, when this project originally kicked off, which was more than 18 months ago now, it's probably about 2 years ago, or even more than that, when it kicked off in development, it was still, originally there was a lot of R&D that needed to be done. And, the Near One team has been fantastic in doing that. And, the original set of validators were chosen in a large part to be kind of R&D partners, but also ones that had really strong reputations for, acting as professional validators, both within Near and then also within the broader industry. Fast forward to today, and Anti can shed more light on this, but the MPC network is very critical part of just the Near technology stack in general. And so, that's part of the reason that we think it's really important that, the way that the network is operated, funded, developed, all of that is very aligned with kind of how Near core development and, Near core funding work in general. We think that's what's going to, properly enshrine it as key important production. So, I mean, from a quality perspective, it's been fully production for over a year now, and Anton, can shed more on that. But I think it's a really important time to kind of move the entire workings of the system to reflective of the position that it holds in kind of the Near product and ecosystem stack.
Let me also probably chime in from the technical point of view. I'm less versed in the product and ecosystem side of things, but I can tell you that from the technical point of view, MPC and specifically chain signatures that are powered by MPC network today are an extremely powerful primitive. It's something that allows people to build very interesting use cases that are controlled from Near, very Near-centric, but unlocks incredible things that people can do cross-chain, and it's not limited to intents. It's actually way more, and there are other products today that are using MPC network. And I don't know, maybe it's a topic for another time or maybe later in this call, but we actually are working on more things to be added, not just chain signatures, but other ways of using MPC networks to provide additional, even more powerful primitives that will unlock even more things in the cross-chain world. And if there is interest in or we have time to discuss it, I'm happy to share our view and our vision. But yes, this is not limited to the current state of things. This is something that I personally think should be a core value proposition of Near as a protocol, for all the developers building on Near and for Near users.
Okay, maybe we take a look at the details of the proposal, Sal, now, and you walk us through the components of it.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Would you like me to share my screen on the governance forum and walk through it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, let me pull this up.
Ozzy, can you help us pull up the screen?
It's the first time I've screen shared in StreamYard, so there's a chance that, okay, here we go. Window. Here we go.
I think Ozzy's dropped, so it's just us now. Yeah.
Okay.
Loading.
See, we've had a very vibrant conversation
Looks
back
good.
and forth across a number
Looks
of
good.
members in the community. So let me just get back up to the top here.
Absolutely.
All right, so everyone can see this?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. All right, so a lot of the abstract and context we just walked through. I think on the problem statement side, or kind of issue that we aim to resolve with this proposal, is the shift in kind of what I describe as a level 2 to 3 maturity in the incentive design around the MPC nodes, which, as I mentioned previously, have been largely funded through intermittent grants to date, and ultimately need to arrive at a sustainable token-based incentive system through which we believe House of Stake is the right forum for discussion, debate, and deliberation around its design. So ultimately, we put forward this viewpoint in terms of what this can look like on an emissions-funded basis, leveraging protocol emissions that are allocated for funding critical infrastructure like the MPC nodes. At the core of the proposal, which again was revised last week, is a mechanism that provides both a floor and a cap on the NEAR tokens that would be allocated on a per node basis and across the MPC node network at large. On the idea of the structure of the proposal around the economics was to learn from proof of stake systems and the debate that has continued around the cost of economic security within them, to define something that consistently provides an incentive that at the lower boundary offsets the key infrastructure and operating costs associated with running an MPC node, and on the upper boundary provides a capped incentive structure paid out in NEAR to MPC node operators, creating a long-term incentive alignment across the MPC node network and the protocol itself. And so the construct of the floor and the cap were set at $1.50 NEAR, which unfortunately we're under today, but I think will rebound soon. And then ultimately on the cap side, at a $3 per NEAR token price, with the monthly payment on a maximum basis being at 4,600 NEAR per qualifying MPC node. We had a number of discussions in the forum around the actual economic cost to run the MPC nodes, which I can probably set up, and then ultimately Anton can jump in from firsthand experience and maybe cover some of the technical elements of. But in effect, each of the MPC node operators within the system need to run 3 MPC nodes, one of them being for testnet, one of them being for production utilization on mainnet, and then another providing backup and resiliency and recovery to guarantee the uptime and availability of chain signatures and the MPC nodes themselves. And so as we looked at quantifying what is the economic cost purely on the infrastructure side, there are 2 different paths that you can take to delivering this. One is a CapEx driven approach, which loads the upfront costs, then requires hosting selection, and ultimately the delivery of software and monitoring, all the things that come around it. And then the second path, which is expressed in some of the comments, but will ultimately live in the GitHub documentation around the technical hardware requirements, where there are a number of third-party hosting vendors that you can select and leverage their PaaS type services to stand up these nodes. In the minimum boundary case, the lowest cost infrastructure provider today in the market is $1,800 through OVH, which a number of these nodes are running in today. Obviously, we do not want to design the system where everyone is focused on a single hosting provider. We need diversity of infrastructure and diversity of underlying footprint to increase the resiliency of the system. But using the lower boundary cost of $1,800 per month, multiplying times 3, is $5,400 USD per month in operating costs purely for infrastructure, without contemplating the people, process time, and software that's required to monitor and oversee the node implementation. I just wanted to walk through this verbally, and then I'll pause and Anton or Kendall can jump in and add some color here. But this was a key point of discussion back and forth in the forum. And I want to make sure we ground and provide clear facts in terms of the logic around why we've designed both the floor and the cap, and then ultimately how we've modeled the actual costs to run this infrastructure. So I'll pause. Anton, if you want to jump in, go for it. If I've covered it well, I can.
No, you did a great job. I think only minor corrections on the pricing side. First of all, is like it's dynamic. We, for example, internally did a lot of research May last year, looking for multiple providers. The main problem we ran into back then was we couldn't even identify more than 2 providers easily that offer the correct the required TDX support. This stuff is just new. It's only available in the latest generation of Intel CPUs, which means not so many providers even adopted it. And going with a single provider, as you correctly said, is completely not an option. So we spent significant time looking for different providers. I think back then we were able to eventually identify like 3 or 4, which is also not ideal. And another thing that we realized is, unfortunately, since this is the latest generation CPU, it also usually comes with beefier machines and like more expensive servers. Basically, what the providers do when they go for the latest generation, they don't go for a cheap machine with the latest CPU. They also add significant memory on top. They add significant storage on top, and that all contributes significantly to the price. So then, even though I think if I'm not mistaken, the current requirement for memory is around 64 gigabytes, I don't think there exists a single provider that offers the TDX server with required CPU with that amount of memory. You're actually paying more for it today. I hope this will change, and I think this will change in the future, but this is the current reality. I think the current price, like the cheapest current price, is around 1,600 or something like this, like plus minus, but not far from 1,800 quoted here. But again, it's dynamic and it's changing, and like it's the cheapest. And then we also know that things like, I think GCP was a place where we've seen it for 8,000 a month, and so on. So it's like the range is huge, and the floor is like somewhere between 1,600 to 1,800, which can also change any moment.
Yeah, just 2 points. Thank you, Anton. I think that was extremely well put. There's 2 points to add on this that I think build on what you're describing here. Is that part one, dynamic pricing. So if I'm quoting 1,800, it was on a point in time basis when we were building this and looking at actually sourcing the OVH infrastructure and what did we actually pay in building a test node to get the experience to actually deploy on testnet, understand all the loaded costs associated with it, as well as the time and energy and DevOps tooling that was needed to do this. But we cannot design an incentive system that locks the structure to the lower boundary cost and then drives MPC node providers to result in centralized infrastructure that completely erodes the security and resiliency premise of building a distributed MPC network. And so we're still very much on the lower boundary of the range, even with dynamic pricing. But just from a design on the incentive side, we can't land in a position where we push everyone in a direction that results in unintended, but probably should have been foreseen consequences. And then the second piece of this is obviously the landscape is changing around TDX as well as other types of TE environments. And so part of the revision that we introduced in the second iteration of the proposal was around an annual governance review process through which VNear token holders can vote to change the incentive structure and emissions allocated to MPC nodes in context of the changing infrastructure landscape and associated costs. And so this is in the same spirit of what we intended to do by introducing the floor and cap, where we're looking at this through the lens as stewards of Near protocol, which naturally at Sovereign we are, being the second largest holder of Near in the world. So I don't know, Kendall, if you have any other comments on this section. I think we did a reasonably good job covering off on this.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just to kind of reiterate the point that a lot of people made a good point about AMD and how that can SEV at SNEP, how that can potentially lower costs, which I know the Tier 1 team is looking into. Now, that being said, and you already highlighted, this is decentralization means a lot of different things, and robustness means a lot of different things. And so we actually do want to have a pretty intentional sort of spread amongst cloud providers, regions, jurisdictions, hardware. We don't want to be all in on. I mean, TDX, we're very happy with it, but it's there's a complex set of potential issues with T's that need to be considered, and so making sure that we approach all of this like very rigorously is what's going to make the system the strongest, and then is ultimately going to make it best positioned to serve the extremely core function that it is serving, and that we expect to to only grow over time. Just want to make sure that community is aware of that. Like, just this is all being done very intentionally, and I think it's exciting now the community gets to be involved in kind of like the decision making process and like the discussion process, which is a really key step. Just want everyone to be aware that like this is all informing kind of how the system is evolving.
Can I also jump in? You mentioned AMD, and I think I've seen this also in the conversation. This is first of all, it's not as trivial from technical point of view. Oh yeah, sorry, I already started talking. Maybe there was a delay. So basically, it's first of all, it's not as trivial as it seems, because there are actually two generations of SAV S&P, the AMD's TEE support, and first one of them is known to be broken, and second one is actually fresh and is not yet like very well available. But more importantly, switching to AMD instead of Intel's TDX is the wrong solution. We don't want to be dependent on a single vendor. What we want to build like a multi-vendor, and ideally not just two, AMD and Intel. Ideally, ARM will come up with their implementation. They're working on it. Ideally, more stuff will be there, and we should have this designed in a way that compromising a single vendor or even two won't compromise the MPC network, meaning we still have to make it possible for the MPC operators to run TDX, even if it's like significantly more expensive than running an AMD node. Same as with the decentralization concerns, we don't want everybody to consolidate on a single vendor and a single data center provider.
All right, so one of the key components of this was really around KPIs and monitoring. And so part of the idea that's embedded in this economic proposal is around the idea of slashing effectively, which is defined in an exhibit. I think it's exhibit 1 on the appendix. Actually, it might be exhibit 2, but basically defines thresholds for qualification for MPC node operators with a 99% uptime, receiving the full allocated or computed rewards for a period on a look-back basis, and adherence to 95 to 99% uptime, having effectively a 50% slash of rewards, which again, with the cost structure in mind here, means that not adhering to the SLA requirements actually results in an operating loss to the MPC node provider. And so there's clear expectations in terms of monitoring uptime and availability. And then ultimately Near One has developed monitoring solutions that are in place today that look at the MPC network and ultimately understand the behavior of the MPC nodes and whether or not they're in compliance with these things. So rather than going through the granular kind of KPIs around the SLAs, I just wanted to call out the design of this and the idea of an economic disincentive for failure to perform, which is kind of the first step in consideration of ultimately if an MPC node is not consistent with the SLA requirements, a decision can be taken through a voting process to actually remove that MPC node operator from the system. There's a number of considerations here. I think the RACI chart and stakeholders involved is an important point for us to cover out loud before we shift gears, just around kind of who's responsible for these different components, who's accountable, consulted, informed. So the piece that was a discussion, and I think is in the spirit of progressive decentralization, was who should actually own the selection or deselection of MPC nodes at this point in time. And I took a stance in the forum, which I stand by today, that we are still not at the point of maturity as a token-based voting ecosystem to drive a decision that could result in our pace and velocity to start to scale this network to key providers to expand resiliency and security of the MPC system. And so we have taken on the responsibility at Sovereign to drive the go-to-market motion associated with MPC node selection, and we'll publish the criteria through which we evaluate these infrastructure providers, looking towards things like service organization control frameworks and other established frameworks that give assurance over availability, uptime, and performance guarantees that those providers will run. And we will consider all of this different criteria as we look at that go-to-market motion, but ultimately we will be driving that and then making recommendations based on our analysis for new MPC node operators to enter the system. This was a point where I think people wanted to have a token vote up front for a number of different reasons: maturity, pace to market. I don't think that's the right design in the current state. And ultimately in the future it will be, but it is not today on February 3rd, February 2nd, 2026. So I just wanted to call that out on the RACI chart. I'll pause. I don't know if Kendall or anyone else have additional comments to make at this point, but I wanted to be explicit in sharing my view on this topic because it was a point that was revisited multiple times in the governance forum.
I'll add something here. I think oftentimes in DAOs, decentralized systems, this RACI matrix is not defined, and I was a real advocate with Cell that we should put this up front. And yeah, in these kind of systems, you can have a diffusion of responsibility. If someone says, everyone's doing it, then no one's doing it. And so when you have this many actors and parts that you need to coordinate, it's really important to be explicit like this. And then we can, track who's doing what, even amongst the participants that need to coordinate, but also token holders and delegates that want to monitor what's going on.
Yeah, totally agreed. I think the other call out on this as well, and thank you to Angela and the House of Stake team, Colosio as well. There's two key components.
And let me add an aspect here. Sorry, I have a terrible delay. All right, just to add two aspects here. Progressive decentralization. I mean, here as House of Stake, we are taking two roles. Number one, we are the platform to allow for voting and making a decision in a decentralized fashion. And this is new to a program like MPC node infrastructure financing at NEAR. And the second one is we facilitate the execution of a proposal. And here in this case, we take the role of paying out the rewards to MPC signers. And both are equally important to deliver successfully together with all stakeholders. And we are taking on a new role here. We have to establish also own operational capacities. And it's good to do this step by step. That's why we are 100% in support of progressive decentralization, how we shaped it here. And also, we want to add value wherever we can. So we might have different incentive structures, different updates of this program in the future, but we determined and we decided and agreed to start with something simple to embark on this journey of decentralization at NEAR with a first solution without limiting the sophistication of the program going forward.
You hit the exact points that I was going to hit, Angela, which was thanks to the House of Stake team for, in the same spirit, taking on certain responsibilities that ultimately in the future may be automated. For example, development work to build out an automated contract-based payment system that checks the NEAR 1 reporting and then issues the rewards. And so there are areas here where we can continue to progressively decentralize over time. All right. I think those are the key components. There's a lot more in this proposal. I know that many of you that are participating on the call have read this in detail and have engaged in proper discussion on the forum. And I think we're better served spending the final 27 minutes here, opening up the forum for questions in the chat and then reacting, rather than me taking you kind of scroll by scroll through different sections of the proposal. I do think those are kind of the key components that were the basis of a number of discussions in the forum. And Ozzy, I'm not sure if you're still here. I actually can't see the chat on my side if there are questions coming in.
Okay, seems we don't have any questions yet. So everyone, feel free to add your questions to the chat.
I'm just looking at the live stream from the YouTube side. Someone's asking, what is MCP? Maybe we could give a basic, yeah.
MPC?
Yes, yeah, definition, yeah.
We should ask them back if they want a technically proficient description, and then we point to Anton, and if you want a business layman view, I can explain it. No, I'm just kidding. Anton, please take this one.
Yeah, I'll do like first like very simple and then give a little bit more technical details. MPC stands for multi-party computation. It's basically a way for multiple machines or multiple parties to produce some, like calculate some outcome, like in a very, very generic way. In our specific case, we're not calculating anything, like it's not like a distributed computer. What we're doing, we're calculating signatures. That's it. So as of now, that's the only thing we do. Each operator has a key share, like a tiny, tiny piece of the shared private key. And you need M of them, M out of N, to collaborate to be able to produce a valid signature with that private key, without any of them sharing their private, like while they all keep their shares private, they still can produce valid signature over some information, which means that, like in practical terms, if you have an account on Near and then you say, I would like to sign a transaction on Ethereum, I'll take this transaction and please sign it for me. Then the MPC operators will take your payload, derive this key for you, like which will be derived for specifically your Near account. And this will also translate in an Ethereum address on the Ethereum chain that is controlled by your Near account. And then MPC, in a distributed fashion, will sign this transaction, will produce a valid signature that you can take and relay to Ethereum and execute that transaction on Ethereum. Obviously, this is like a very raw thing, and I don't think people will be directly doing it. I mean, we tried it, it works, but that's something that is very, very inconvenient. Hence, there are like SDKs, there are bridges that are doing exactly this for you, so you don't really need to do this yourself. But under the hood, this means that this distributed set of MPC operators, each holding a small share, is able to produce this valid signature based on your request on Near without being able to independently produce a signature and stealing your money, which is, I think, is like a very, very critical point, which is also the reason why we want to have more operators here, why we want to pack those nodes into trusted execution environments so that operator can't even extract their share in the first place, and so on.
That was great. Do you want to take Rika's question?
Yes, I just saw Rika's question. Yep, I saw that. They are coming up on my side now. I think they're just more no comments previously, and I'm used to, on the live streams, I've participated with the community having a flow of comments and questions. So yeah, so to clarify on this, there is an trailing 180-day average computation with a floor price of $1.50 and a maximum price of $3 Near, so that we guarantee the floor and the cap on the incentive system. But ultimately, the actual calculation will say, what is the trailing daily close 0 UTC of Near based on Binance USDT pair? What's the average across that period of time? That is the basis to compute the number of Near that is distributed. If that average falls below the floor is enforced. If that average is above the cap is enforced. I think this one's best directed to you, Anton, but the privacy work stream is the one I'm most excited about personally.
Could you read the question? I'm trying to understand where can I see them?
It says, what future use cases can we expect from the MPC nodes besides chain signatures?
Oh, actually a few. So I'd probably start with like something that is possible today, and which represents a potentially hidden massive use case that is already there. Since like in the way I described, there is a way for each Near account to derive an infinite amount of keys. And to do so, you don't even need to perform any transaction in Near. So today, for example, let's say I want to put some Bitcoin aside without anybody knowing what that is. And I just derive that address and just put my Bitcoin there. Nobody knows anything. There's like nothing happening on Near. It's just something on Bitcoin happened. Somebody transferred some amount to some address. And the fact that that address is controlled by my near account is pretty much impossible to figure out, because I derived that key myself, and there's like infinite number of potential keys derived, and there's like millions of accounts on near in this place. But at some point when I want to use it, I can kind of craft the transaction, get a signature on near, and then it moves. So this is kind of this is a flaw that is there in the way we account for the value of assets like protected by chain signatures, because it's impossible to actually see unless people start moving their assets. But there is potentially this kind of privacy case that is already in use. As of the future work, we're like almost done with implementing the following thing, confirming the status of a transaction on a foreign chain. Essentially, if something happened, let's say on Solana, you can get the transaction hash, some events, and so on. But on near, you can't easily say that, like, or validate that that transaction was correct. Some tokens were transferred, something happened, which is usually solved by various projects like Wormhole and so on, which have their own pros and cons. And we can also introduce the same thing into the MPC network, which basically checks the status of the transaction on the foreign chain. And then let's say we have a network of like 20 operators, and they need 15 to produce a valid signature. That means if 15 operators check the status of a transaction on Solana and agree that this transaction has happened in this very specific way, they will just sign this, and then they will be able to post it on near. And then it means every contract on near will be able to also validate that and use it for some purpose. It means bridges can use that. It means if you deposit on Solana your meme coin into a specific bridge contract, then there is a way for the bridge side on near to know that this has happened, and to mint your like tokens on the near side, and to do like to perform some action on top of this, move it to intents and swap it and whatnot. So this is basically something that we call confirming, like reading foreign chain data. So that's one of the cases. That's an immediate thing that we're pretty much completed the development already. Then there are off-chain authorization cases. As of now, the only way for you to request a signature is on-chain. So if you want to sign something, you have to perform a transaction on near. You have to call that sign function on the MPC contract, provide the payload, and then it will be signed, which is, I mean, is good for a lot of cases like bridging. It's not great for anything like for wallet use cases, for example, or things like authentication on a website. You don't want to run a transaction every time you authenticate into your email. So there is actually a design where we basically can say, if your contract has a specific view call that is like, is signature authorized or something like this, then you can just request this completely off-chain. You can come to some RPC node, provide some input with some signatures and so on. Then MPC operators will look at that, will use your contract code to validate whether this specific payload should be signed on your behalf or not. And if yes, they will sign and like return the signature to you. All of this happening completely off-chain. The authorization to produce this signature is on-chain. That's like the state that is controlled by your near account, but everything else happens off-chain, which means it's actually much faster, and which means it's also cheaper, and which allows you to use it in like multi-chain wallets, or in the setups where you do like, I don't know, email authorization and like website authentication and whatnot. Yeah, these are like the immediate things that we're working on, and I think these two add very powerful primitives on like that I expect developers to come up with very creative ways of using that beyond what we imagine as today.
Okay, should we close the call with some experience you maybe want to share about setting up this proposal and bringing it to vote? We know House of Stake is brand new. We've launched in October. what would you recommend other proposal authors if they'd like to come up with a proposal? How to prepare it, how to bring it to vote cell, Kendall?
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say is, despite being relatively new, from an organization and execution perspective, I think the team on the House of Stake side was equally, if not more, well prepared than we were on our side. And the key kind of long poles in the tent were running down and comparing, the cost economic analysis that we had derived from firsthand implementation of a node on testnet with, the experience that Anton was describing here from the Near One team in terms of hosting provider selection, line of sight to future TE support, and things of that matter that really allowed us to deliver a second iteration. I think Klaus will laugh. I struggled with the typeform structure to actually get the proposal live in the initial format. So that was a pain point on my side, but something that he helped me through. And then I think from an organization and execution perspective, things went quite smoothly. I will joke that I spent a lot of time during a family vacation in the comment section of the forum. So in the future, if we put forward another proposal, I will not do that prior to trying to go away with my family. But overall, I think we've reached a key milestone through proper discussion in both the forum and then hopefully in this conversation today as well. And we ultimately will be advancing the proposal in its current format to an on-chain voting process. And I'll say it again, as I've said in the forum, as well as to the previous community call, that we do intend on voting on this proposal using 500K near and locking that into the House of Stake system from our balance sheet. We feel that's an appropriate size that does not sway the vote. We do intend on voting on future proposals and scaling with the system over time. And I'd thank the Agora team for delivering on the technical execution path to support Fireblocks to enable us to do that. So overall team effort to get to this point, a lot of work to do to get this passed and ultimately implemented. But I'm confident that based on the back and forth and conversations that we've had in the community over the past 2 to 3 weeks, that we will get there. And this will also be a major milestone for House of Stake. The first kind of flagship economic proposal through a decentralized governance system that has learned from the successes and failures of the market over time and designed a new approach that leverages both token voting as well as knowledge-based contributions. So that's kind of my TLDR. Well, that was a long form, so I can't say TLDR. That's my point of view on the House of Stake process.
I guess just
Charles, anything to add, or Kendall? Yeah.
Sal, as he's done this whole time, has done an incredible job of summarizing everything and laying it out there. I think the only thing I'll add is just that, the Near One team has done an amazing job of delivering an incredible piece of technology here. It's a very complex system, one that there was a lot of work that had to go into it to get it to the point it is now, where it's like very safely able to be used in. And has been used now for quite some time in some of the most important production systems in the Near ecosystem. It's a real key differentiator, and I think this is a super important step and progression to really enshrining it as that core infrastructure. So please get engaged in the forum if there's any other details that you need. But this is definitely very important, and also as Sal said, a very exciting milestone for all those groups, and also just for Near and the Near ecosystem in general.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge Sal, Kendall, Anton, and it's been a pleasure working with you to get this proposal ready. It is a learning journey to, prepare in a format that works for decentralized governance and get it ready, get it vote ready, is a certain kind of standard of clarity and specificity so that everybody can track and understand it. And I also want to acknowledge the delegates and the token holders who are showing up on the forum, deeply engaged, probably spending hours reading line by line, going through all of these kind of details. So that's one of the benefits of rather than doing something behind closed doors or in a centralized fashion. You've got this collective intelligence, these hundreds of people that are showing up and wanting to contribute in different ways, which is a beautiful thing to see. Yeah.
Okay, let's close the call with a call to action. Ozzy, if you can bring up my slides. Yeah, this is the link to the proposal. So check out the proposal at House of Stake .org/proposals, lock your near today at houseofstake.org assets, receive VNear and delegate. Keep in mind before February 5th. So currently we are in this process of forum discussion. The screening committee will review the proposal, and once this is signed off and activated to vote, a snapshot is going to be taken. So have your say, lock your near today, latest before February 5th, and participate in the voting and make a difference for MPC node infrastructure financing. Thanks everyone for coming, joining this AMA, and looking forward to the voting.
Just to clarify around when you said a snapshot will be taken, you have to get your VNear locked in before February 5th when it goes up to vote. And then that's the amount that you can vote with in the next 14 days. So if you try to add more, near and VNear, once the vote is live, then that will not show up, that you can vote with. So you've got a couple of days to get your near locked. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.